The low hum of the first-class cabin on Flight 1876 to Bali was a symphony of quiet privilege. Passengers settled into their spacious seats, the air scented with leather and anticipation. Xavier and Zara Brednam moved with the practiced ease of seasoned travelers, stowing their designer carry-ons before taking their seats, 3A and 3B. Zara slid into her preferred spot by the window, a portal from which she could watch the intricate ballet of the ground crew, and later, the clouds. Xavier settled beside her, initiating their pre-flight ritual. He'd quiz her on emergency exits. She'd remind him to switch his phone to airplane mode, small traditions that bridged the gaps in their time together. "This is going to be an amazing trip," Xavier said, squeezing his daughter's hand. A genuine, radiant smile crossed Zara's face, a rare glimpse of the little girl still inside the poised 16-year-old she had become. That smile vanished the moment Xavier's phone buzzed. His expression soured before he even glanced at the screen. "It's Langley," he sighed, the weight of his world settling back onto his shoulders. "Dad, you promised," Zara whispered, her voice tight with disappointment. "I know, baby girl. It's a security briefing I have to sign off on. 10 minutes tops," he said, his eyes pleading for her to understand. "I promise I'll be back before takeoff." The look they exchanged was a silent conversation, her skepticism clashing with his desperate sincerity. He gave her shoulder a final squeeze and disappeared down the aisle, his voice already dropping into the measured tone he reserved for matters of national security. Zara was the daughter of Xavier Brednam, a man who, at 47, was one of the youngest division chiefs in FBI history. He headed the counterterrorism division with a quiet authority that commanded respect without ever demanding it. He was the kind of man whose phone rang at 3 in the morning and had presidents waiting on his assessment, the kind of father who had missed more birthdays than he'd attended. His promise of 2 uninterrupted weeks, no phones, no emergencies, was everything to Zara. It was a chance to reclaim the connection eroded by his demanding career. Her own life was a reflection of his discipline. While other teenagers haunted malls, Zara's world was one of advanced placement classes, debate team captaincies, and volunteering. Her weekends were filled with academic prep and piano recitals, often followed by dinner alone, her father's empty chair a silent testament to his absence. She never complained. She understood his work was important, even if it left a void that no achievement could fill. They were Brednams. Their wealth was not something they flaunted. It was simply the background of their lives, as unremarkable as the air they breathed. From their handcrafted Italian luggage to the private beachfront villa waiting for them in Bali, their privilege was quiet and assured. Just as Zara began to let herself believe in her father's promise, the cabin's calm was shattered. Bethany Caldwell made her entrance. She was a woman encased in designer clothes that seemed to strain against her frame, her expression broadcasting an overwhelming sense of irritation. Fanning herself with her boarding pass, she lumbered down the aisle, her Louis Vuitton handbag swinging like a wrecking ball. When she reached row 3, she stopped, her eyes narrowing on Zara. "Excuse me," she declared, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cabin's murmur. "You're in my seat." Zara looked up, confused. "I don't think so. My ticket is for 3A. "Well, I have a window seat, and this is my row," Bethany insisted, her voice rising. With a composure that belied her years, Zara calmly held up her boarding pass. "My ticket says 3A. This is my seat." Bethany snatched the pass, glanced at it, and thrust it back. "Let me see your ticket, please," Zara requested, her voice even. After a theatrical search, Bethany produced her own. Zara pointed to the print. "It says 3C, ma'am. That's the aisle seat." "There must be a mistake," Bethany huffed, her face reddening. "I always book a window seat." Her gaze drifted over Zara, taking in her youth, her braids, her skin. A cruel smirk formed on her lips. "People like you don't belong in first class anyway." The insult hung in the air like toxic smoke. Zara said nothing, her expression a careful mask of neutrality as she turned to stare out the window, fighting to maintain her dignity. The silence was broken by Bethany's sharp, impatient voice. "Flight attendant, I need assistance immediately." Madison, the flight attendant, appeared instantly, her professional smile firmly in place. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "This girl is in my seat," Bethany announced, gesturing at Zara. "She clearly doesn't belong here, and I want her removed." "I'd be happy to check both tickets," Madison said, her tone level. After examining both boarding passes, she confirmed, Ms. Brednam is in her correct assigned seat 3A. Ma'am, your seat is 3C on the aisle. This is ridiculous. Bethany's face flushed a deep crimson. I refuse to sit next to her. Find her another seat or I'll have your job. Madison's smile tightened, but her voice remained steady. Ma'am, I cannot move another passenger from their assigned seat. I can see if another window seat is available for you once boarding is complete. The offer of a compromise only enraged Bethany further. Do you have any idea who my husband is? She hissed, leaning closer. Raymond Caldwell, Assistant Director at the Department of Justice. Now, are you going to move her, or do I need to make a phone call? Madison's expression remained impassive. I understand, ma'am, but our airline policy is firm. It was then that Bethany's rage boiled over. Denied the deference she so clearly expected, she turned on Zara. I don't care what your ticket says, she snarled, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. That window seat is mine, and I want you removed, now. Before Zara could react, Bethany lunged forward, her fingers aggressively pinching Zara's cheek. The sudden, sharp pain brought tears to Zara's eyes. The shocking act of assault silenced the cabin. A teenager 2 rows ahead angled his phone, the camera lens glinting between the seats. A businesswoman's thumbs flew across her screen, her phone clearly recording. Ms. Caldwell, that is assault, Madison stated, her voice now cold and hard. I must ask you to take your assigned seat, or I will be forced to involve our air marshal. Call him, Bethany shrieked, her voice trembling with indignation. Call security. I want this investigated immediately. She could not have known that 3 rows back, Agent Teresa Lopez, part of Xavier's security detail, had already sent a secure message detailing the escalating confrontation involving her director's daughter. Nor could she have known that, deep within the airport, that message had just derailed one of the nation's most critical security briefings. Xavier Brednam read the text from Agent Lopez, his blood running cold. The FBI director and the protective father inside him waged a silent, furious war. The father won. Winters, take over, he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. I need to return to the plane, immediately. Back in the cabin, Bethany was still demanding security be called. She was about to get her wish, though not in the way she imagined. As Madison signaled a colleague, the cockpit door opened, and the captain, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, emerged to see what was delaying his flight. At 58, Captain Harrington had witnessed nearly every conflict imaginable in the confines of an aircraft. But the raw prejudice simmering in this confrontation made even his seasoned stomach turn. Ladies, what seems to be the problem? He asked, his authoritative presence momentarily silencing the venomous exchange. Before Madison could speak, Bethany Caldwell seized the opportunity. Captain, thank goodness, she gushed, her voice layered with false relief. This girl has taken my window seat and your flight attendant refuses to do her job. My husband is with the Justice Department and I assure you this incompetence will not be tolerated. She needs to be removed from this flight, now. Captain Harrington turned an expectant gaze to Madison, who calmly recounted the facts. The correctly assigned seats, the verified boarding passes, and Bethany's escalating threats. Ms. Caldwell, the captain said evenly after listening, I understand your disappointment, but our seating assignments are final. Ms. Brednam is in her designated seat. Bethany's face twisted in frustration. The reality of the situation was refusing to bend to her will. Desperate, she pivoted to a new tactic, raising her voice for the benefit of the surrounding passengers. I don't feel safe sitting next to her, she declared. As a taxpayer and the wife of a senior government official, I demand to be moved. The implication hung in the air, thick and ugly. Her discomfort wasn't about safety. It was about the race of the young woman beside her. Throughout the ordeal, Zara had remained silent, wrapped in the protective emotional shell that children of public figures learn to build. But this last statement, the blatant bigotry, the weaponizing of taxpayer status, cracked her composure. My father will be back soon, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady, laced with the unshakable confidence of someone who knows precisely who they are. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Bethany saw only an opening for mockery. Oh, I'm terrified, she sneered, placing a hand over her heart. Who's Daddy? A baggage handler? The man who cleans the toilets? Her laughter was sharp, designed to wound. Listen, little girl, whatever your father does, my husband, Raymond Caldwell, can make people disappear with a single phone call. The thinly veiled threat caused Captain Harrington's expression to harden. "Ms. Caldwell, I must warn you that threatening other passengers—" He never finished the sentence. A sudden shift rippled through the cabin. A hush fell over the passengers, an instinctual silence, as all attention was drawn to the front of the first-class section. A commanding figure had appeared. Xavier Brednam stood in the entryway, his 6'2" frame impeccably dressed in a suit. But it wasn't his size that commanded the space. It was the focused intensity in his gaze as it swept the cabin and locked onto the scene in row 3. As he moved down the aisle with purpose, a remarkable thing happened. 4 individuals, scattered throughout the cabin, rose silently to their feet. Agent Lopez from row 6, Agent Chen by a window in row 7, Agent Rodriguez from the back, and Agent Patel near the galley. They didn't draw weapons or make a sound. They simply stood, a synchronized, silent declaration of presence. Their director was here. Captain Harrington's eyes widened in recognition. Not from the news. The FBI's counterterrorism chief avoided publicity, but from high-level security briefings. This was one of the most powerful men in the country. "Director Brednam," the captain said, his tone shifting to one of profound respect. "My apologies for the disturbance." The title landed like a shockwave in the silent cabin. "What's happening here?" Xavier asked. His voice was quiet, yet it carried an authority that cut through the tension. His eyes moved from his daughter, to Bethany, to the captain, assessing the situation with terrifying speed. He could see the subtle signs of Zara's distress, the perfect posture, the controlled breathing, and while the professional in him was proud of her composure, the father in him felt his blood boil. He immediately recognized Bethany's type, someone who wielded status like a cudgel, who believed the rules were for other people. As Xavier reached the row, he allowed Bethany to continue her rant. "When Raymond hears about this," she fumed, "he'll have your badge, and yours. Do you have any idea who answers to him?" Xavier paused. With deliberate calm, he reached into his jacket and withdrew his credentials, letting the FBI shield catch the light. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Bethany's face. "I don't understand," she stammered, looking from Xavier to the agents now standing sentinel throughout the cabin. "Who are you people?" Xavier's response was as precise as a surgeon's blade. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "I believe you know my name even if you don't recognize my face. Your husband certainly does." He let the words hang in the air for a perfect beat. "Your husband Raymond reports directly to me." The blood drained from Bethany's face. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The man whose name she had used as a weapon, the source of her power, answered to the father of the girl she had just spent 20 minutes harassing and demeaning. "That's not possible," she whispered, her expression a mask of dawning horror. "I heard everything, Mrs. Caldwell," Xavier continued, his voice a low, steely current. "Every threat, every insult you directed at my daughter, whose father you suggested might clean toilets for a living." Bethany's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was a predator who had just realized it was trapped in a cage with a lion. I didn't know she was your daughter, sir," she finally managed. "I would never have—" "Never have what?" Xavier interjected, his voice cutting through her excuses. "Never have demanded a young woman be removed from her rightful seat? Never have threatened flight staff for doing their jobs? Or never have done any of it if you knew someone with more power was watching?" He leaned in slightly. "I've just been informed that your husband is being notified of this incident as we speak." Bethany's composure finally shattered. "Director Brednam," she pleaded, her voice trembling, "this is all a terrible misunderstanding." Xavier held up a hand, silencing her instantly. "Let me be clear. The fact that Zara is my daughter is irrelevant. Your behavior would have been unacceptable if she were anyone on this plane." He paused, then added, "Your apology is not owed to me. It's owed to her." Forced into the spotlight, Bethany turned slowly to Zara, her face a war of resentment and fear. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, the words tasting like ash, "for how I spoke to you. It was inappropriate." Under Xavier's unwavering gaze, she tried again, the words physically paining her. "I apologize for saying you didn't belong here. I was out of line." Zara simply gave a single, dignified nod, acknowledging the words without accepting them. Captain Harrington stepped forward. Director, I am prepared to have Ms. Caldwell removed from the flight. The entire cabin held its breath. This was the final, public humiliation. But Xavier surprised them all. That won't be necessary, Captain, he said calmly. I'm certain Mrs. Caldwell understands the importance of respectful behavior from now on. It wasn't mercy. It was a demonstration of absolute power. The power to grant clemency was greater than the power to punish. However, Xavier continued, turning to the flight attendant, I do believe alternative seating arrangements would be appropriate. Madison stepped forward, her expression perfectly neutral. Of course, Director. We can accommodate Ms. Caldwell in economy. The suggestion of being relegated to the back of the plane was the final crushing blow, a humiliation that struck at the very core of the entitlement that had started it all. As Bethany Caldwell was quietly escorted away, the silent cabin was left with the unforgettable spectacle of privilege meeting its perfect and final consequence. She offered no protest, a silent acknowledgement that any objection would only worsen her already precarious situation. As the lead flight attendant prepared to escort Bethany to her new seat, a colleague emerged from the economy cabin, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. After their brief, quiet exchange, she turned to Xavier. Director, we have an elderly passenger in economy who is struggling with the limited legroom. She's just had knee surgery. Would you object if we offered Ms. Caldwell's original seat to her? A fleeting shadow, perhaps the ghost of a smile, danced across Xavier's composed features. I think that would be an excellent solution. And so it was that Bethany Caldwell, so certain of her entitlement, was guided back to a middle seat in economy. Her first-class throne was graciously offered to an elderly woman with a walking cane, whose face radiated a mixture of disbelief and profound gratitude. The poetic justice of the exchange was lost on no one, least of all the passengers who continued to discreetly document the entire affair. As Bethany disappeared down the aisle, her shoulders slumped in humiliation, Xavier turned to his team. He gave a subtle nod, a silent command that was instantly understood and obeyed. Throughout the cabin, the agents who had risen to their feet returned to their seats with the same synchronized precision they had shown just moments before. They resumed their cover as ordinary travelers, alert but unobtrusive, masters of their craft. Only then did Xavier finally take the seat beside his daughter. The immediate crisis had passed, but its emotional echo lingered in the charged air between them. As the flight attendants prepared for departure, father and daughter sat in a heavy silence, each processing what had just happened. Zara was the first to speak, her voice a low murmur meant only for him. You didn't have to do all that, she said, though the relief in her eyes betrayed how much his intervention had meant. I could have handled it. I know you could have, he replied, his own voice just as quiet. You were handling it beautifully, with more dignity than I might have shown at your age. He paused, a shared recognition passing between them. But you shouldn't have to handle it alone. Not when I'm here. That simple declaration, not when I'm here, hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken truth of his frequent absences. The school events, the competitions, the difficult moments she had faced alone while national security claimed his attention. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and having to face bigotry alone, Xavier continued, the conversation shifting to something deeper. Dignity isn't about silently absorbing abuse. It's about knowing your own worth so completely that another person's attempt to diminish you is meaningless. Like what you just did with her? Zara asked, nodding toward the back of the plane. You could have had her removed from the flight. You didn't. Xavier considered this, choosing his words with care. Power isn't measured by what you can do to others. It's measured by what you choose not to do, especially when you have every justification. He met her gaze. Remember that, Zara. The true measure of authority is not in the punishment you can inflict, but in the restraint you can exercise when provoked. As the aircraft began to taxi toward the runway, their conversation deepened, a rare moment of connection in the widening space between his responsibilities and her receding childhood. They spoke of privilege and its blind spots, of the double standards Zara navigated daily, and of the immense weight that came with his position. I'm proud of you, Xavier said finally, the words simple but sincere. Not because you're perfect, but because you're becoming someone who stands firm in her principles, even when it's hard. Zara's expression softened, her usual reserve melting away. I learned from watching you. As the plane accelerated, lifting them toward the clouds and the promise of Bali, Xavier made a decision. This vacation is going to be different, he said, the words carrying the weight of a vow. 2 weeks. No emergency calls, no briefings, just us. The skepticism in Zara's eyes was a familiar shield, forged from years of broken promises. But something in her father's tone, in the resolute set of his jaw, felt different this time. You mean it? She asked, a fragile hope in her voice. I've already instructed my team, he confirmed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. Unless there is an imminent terrorist attack, it gets handled without me. I've missed too much already, Zara. I don't want to miss any more. What followed was a tapestry of moments woven from that promise. They explored ancient temples, their laughter echoing through stone corridors. They shared quiet conversations on the beach as the setting sun painted the horizon in impossible colors. For the first time since her mother's death, Zara had her father's undivided attention, not as Director Brednam, but simply as Dad. One evening, they sat on their villa's private deck overlooking the ocean. The tropical night wrapped around them like velvet, the sky a dizzying spray of unfamiliar stars. Do you think she learned anything? Zara asked, her question surfacing from the quiet, a clear echo of the airplane. Or will she just be angry? Xavier considered this, admiring his daughter's capacity for reflection. People like that rarely change completely, he admitted. But sometimes, an experience like this creates a hairline crack in their certainty, a small opening where a new understanding might, eventually, take root. I hope so, Zara said softly. Not for her sake, but for her children, if she has any. That kind of thinking hurts the person who holds it just as much as the person it's aimed at. For Bethany Caldwell, the lesson was one of public humiliation and the chilling realization that her husband's career now rested on the discretion of the man she had insulted. For Zara, it was a lesson in the true nature of strength, seeing authority wielded not as a weapon, but as a shield. And for Xavier, it was the most profound lesson of all, that no security briefing, no national emergency could ever be more important than being present for the moments that shaped his daughter's world.